Okay, I think we are just about 1 minute after the top of the hour here. So, welcome everyone to the Stacklok user group meeting for November 18th, 2024. We're going to go ahead and get things started, and I'm going to kick things off here. So, today I am joined by my colleague Oz, who will be presenting our Minder Monday series. In today's episode, he's going to be going over writing Minder rules and profiles. But before I pass it over to Oz, I just want to give a quick intro and housekeeping items. So, as I said, this is the Stacklok user group meeting for November 18th, 2024. I'm Stacy Potter. I'm a community manager here at Stacklok and joined by my colleague Oz, who will be diving into the topic of writing rules and profiles in Minder today. So I hope you're in the right spot, and thanks for joining us. So we've allocated an hour for this entire presentation today, including Q&A. So if you have questions, feel free to put them into chat, and we'll tackle them as we go. If it's relevant to what's being said, I'll just kind of pop on and ask Oz your questions as they come along. We do have a hard stop at the top of the hour. We probably won't take that long, but just so you know, I'll pop in if we run over and kind of shut things down at the top of the hour there. So as I mentioned before, Oz and I work at Stacklok, and even though we're talking about our open source project Minder today, we've recently donated this project to the OpenSSF, and it is now a sandbox project. So we're super happy about that. And just to kind of give you a quick, who we are in a nutshell, our goal is to bring dev and security teams together to eliminate risk by bringing developers risk intelligence into their existing workflows and tools by providing security teams with centralized policy for their entire software development lifecycle. So our team's background is in creating, maintaining, and scaling open source systems, including Kubernetes and Sigstore, among others. We're drawing from our expertise in open source and security to give developers and open source communities better tools to secure their software and manage external dependency risk. We believe that contributing to open source is a necessary part of our everyday work. And as part of their daily tasks, our company leaders, engineers, and PMs build, maintain, and contribute to open source projects and lead open source initiatives that support upstream communities and advance open source security. So you can learn more about us and what we do at stacklok.com on our GitHub, or you can connect with us on our Discord server and subscribe to our YouTube channel and join our Stacklok user group meeting. And with that, I am going to bring Oz onto the stage. Hello, Oz. And I'm going to add his presentation. There we go. All right, you're all set. Thanks so much for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me, and hello, everybody, again. All right, so today we're going to be talking about writing rules and profiles. It doesn't sound super interesting, but it is one of Minder's stronger points, so I don't know. I'm thrilled. I think this is pretty awesome. So, yeah. Quick recap. We did another talk about Minder and explain what it is and what it can do. So if you don't know what it is, I suggest you go back and look at that one. But just to rephrase again this whole thing, Minder is an open source control plane platform, right? Which means we help you automate, we help you build workflows on top of supply chain security, right? So we want to help you solve things quick and easy, and that's the goal of the whole project. Minder manages different aspects of the supply chain, and we call those aspects entities, right? So a repository is an entity, a pull request is an entity, an artifact, a release is an entity, right? And Minder uses a thing called providers in order to get and manage those entities, right? So GitHub is a provider, GitLab is a provider for Minder, right? And finally, in order for Minder to do its magic, it wants to apply policy on those entities, and it does so via rules and profiles, which are the topic of today. So that's where we're at. Hopefully this is not too crazy for folks. I don't think I introduced like a big uh, I don't know, bucket or hose of water for you, but try to keep those in mind when you're thinking about the Minder model. So profiles, what are they? Profiles is probably the first thing that you're going to see when you start doing policy in Minder. It is a collection of rules that define the state of your supply chain, right? And so we're going to see in a little bit how that looks like, but just think about it that way. You have a set of rules which try to describe the state of the world of how you want it to be for your supply chain. Uh, those rules are applied to different entities, right? So you're going to have rules for your repos. You're going to have maybe different rules for your pull requests and your artifacts. And so all of those are reflected and persisted via profiles. And finally, profiles also help you define the toggles of how Minder is going to interact with your supply chain. You might want to auto remediate, right? You are going to alert perhaps. And so, and you're finally going to set some knobs and handles for each of the rules in case they support them, right? So that's what profiles do in a nutshell. They look like this, right? So do we see them in the screen, by the way? I still see the previous one.
Are you looking to change your screen to your
I did change
terminal?
there we go.
There we
Now
go.
now it went
Great.
there. Just took
Perfect.
its sweet time. All right. So profiles would normally look like this, right? So you can view them as YAML, for example, and they contain, as I mentioned, the knobs and handles of what you're going to set, right? So like Kubernetes in some way, we do have versioning for our APIs, right? So it's a type profile and you can name them however you want. Uh, they apply to a certain context, and these are some of the toggles that I mentioned, right? In this case, we're not alerting, we're not auto remediating, we're only giving you the status of your supply chain. And you can start setting rules for each of the entities, right? So for repos, maybe you want CodeQL to be enabled and secret scanning. Uh, for artifacts, you're going to want something else. For releases, you're going to want something else. So all of these are the things that you can set within your profile. And so to make things a little bit quicker, let's build one, right? And it's not surprisingly that hard. So now I'm going to access the terminal, and I'm right now logged into the production instance of Minder that our friends at Stacklok host. Uh, I have a couple of projects here, but I'm going to be using my personal one. And in this case, I have Minder repo list. I have one repo enabled, which is demo repo go, right? So it is just a sample repo, nothing fancy, and it contains a little bit of Go code, some GitHub workflows, and that's about it, right? So it's nothing too complicated. Now, normally when you want to build a profile, you don't want to start from scratch. You want to start from whatever your vendor gives you. In this case, our vendor is your friends at Stacklok, but Minder is flexible enough to allow you to bring in your own rule types if you want. So if you would be running your own instance, which some people might, you might want to go ahead and do that, right? So for that, we provide a repo called Minder Rules and Profiles. And as you can see, we do provide some things for you here that you can just take into use and hook into Minder, right? So we have some common rules. We have some for specific for GitHub, right? So browse them, check it out. In this case, I have already installed them, and you can install them simply as Minder rule type apply, and you give it a folder, and it will just go ahead and install all the rule types from this repo, right? So you can keep them in Git, or you could even automate it if you want. I'm not going to show that today, but that's for another discussion. Embedded argument. Oh, I had some local changes. Sorry about that. But normally you would do that if you don't do crazy changes like I am right now. So let's go ahead and start building our profile. So Minder rule type, sorry about that, list will show you the list of rule types that you have. And this is a big list that I have installed right now. So artifact signature, action check defaults. So in this case, let's just do something super quick and easy. And we're gonna check for secret scanning, because that's a very easy check that everybody should have. GitHub gives it to you for free, so there is no reason for you not to have it. So profile.yaml, and let's go. Version v1, it's a profile, and this is gonna be my cool profile. I'm not gonna give it a particular context, and this is all we need for now, right? So we're just gonna add one rule to repos, but first of all, let's see. Just, yeah, alert immediate. It's alert singular. I'm not gonna enable this. Remediate off. And we're gonna toggle this later. Repository. And so at this point, I'm just disabling these toggles and I'm starting to define the rules for our repository. Right, so secret scanning, def, nothing. Why did I do this? Right, so let's look at our rule types right here and let's look for secret scanning. So in this case, secret scanning is defined as follows, right? I am just going to view the rule type right here, minder rule type get.
Hey, Oz, is it possible to zoom in just a little bit on this
Sorry about
screen?
that.
Oh, yeah, perfect. Thanks.
So now I'm viewing the rule type secret scanning, and you can see that it applies to repositories, right? It's in my project. You can view a little bit more things about it. But something that we have to know is, does it take parameters? And in this case, it doesn't. I chose one of the simplest ones. So you can view a little bit more info with YAML, but you should be able to see that the definition, the rule schema doesn't really get anything that's mandatory, right? So it doesn't really show us that we need to do a lot. So I can just go ahead and enable it as follows: no definition and secret scanning. So let's create it for our profile and see how our repo is doing. Minder profile create profile.yaml, and we have it here. Now we want to see the status, so minder profile status list, my cool profile, and we can see that it's failing. So why is it failing? Because we don't have secret scanning enabled. And so what's going on over here? Let's see. Lamascoira demo repo go. Here you go. And if I go to the settings and code security, you will notice that it's effectively not enabled, right? So if I would go ahead and enable it, it would pass, right? Which is not particularly interesting. If you're doing things at scale, this definitely doesn't scale, right? Like having a security engineer or the organization admin going ahead and toggling each and every repo, it's painful. So let's disable it for now and let Minder do its job. So now I have disabled it right here. So you should see that Minder immediately knows that it's not in the right track. And if we toggle remediate and we set it to on, Minder profile apply, right, we should see now that it's now enabled, right? So Minder went ahead and did his job, and this thing is now passing. Here we go. Now let's add something else because we want to iterate on this profile and get our organization more secure as we go, right? As we learn some things, as we discover rules. So Minder rule type list, secret push, right? So another very easy toggle that all open source projects should enable in their GitHub repos is secret push protection. All right. So that prevents you from accidentally pushing a secret, and GitHub will do its thing and try to help you out. So let's add that here. Minder profile.yaml. Here we go. And type secret push protection, no definition. And all you have to do is start adding things here, applying it, and Minder goes ahead and does its job. Whoa. Where is it? There we go. It was here. So now it's all enabled and Minder just keeps iterating over and over, right? So it just starts converging. And the process of building profiles is not particularly interesting. It's meant to be quite easy. You just pick and choose, and we are going to give you a huge set of role types to choose from. We also give you a big set of profiles too. So if you go ahead and go to Minder rules and profiles, you're going to see some of them like homoglyph detection, right? So this detects hidden Unicode characters in pull requests, right? So this is something that you can enable. You can also get a profile and start extending it. So for example, let's say that I have a repo and I don't want Dependabot because I use Renovate. So you could just select this one, enable code QL and secret scanning and such, and just delete it and apply it to your organization. So this is how it normally goes. It's not particularly difficult, I think. And so hopefully you can use this and start building your own profiles, right? So let's go ahead and continue. Maybe I should ask for some questions. I don't know if anybody has added anything to the chat.
I don't see anything as of yet, but if you have any questions and want to ask them at any point, feel free to pop them in the chat and
Yeah.
I'll hop on and ask them on your behalf to us.
All right. In the meantime, and I can answer, you feel free to interrupt and ask questions at any point.
Great.
Let's go ahead and continue with our role types now. Right. So you notice profiles and profiles take rules into use, but rules really come from a thing called rule types. And that's also pluggable, right? You can also write your own and extend Minder this way. So what a rule type is a little bit more of an advanced concept, but it allows you to check for a specific aspect of an entity, right? So you'll check for a specific knob or a setting that you really care about, and you'll normally do that with a rule type. It has all the verbiage, right? So it should help and give you enough information for you to act on the finding, and it's going to contain all the nitty gritty details. So which REST call am I doing? Which policy check am I on? How am I going to do it? Do I have an automated fix or not? Because it's also a possibility that you only have the check, but you don't have a fix yet. So that's also a possibility, and that's how you do it. We define rule types in YAML as well, as you will see in the screen in a little bit. Let's wait for the screen to show. There we go. And as I said, it contains all the verbiage about a rule type. So you have the version, you have the type, very similar to the profiles. You have a name. You'll normally have a user-friendly name that you want to work with. In case that you find a failure, what message do you give, right? So we want to give really user-friendly stuff as opposed to just some ID that you may not be able to reason about. You can also add a release phase. So let's say that my rule is alpha, and so expect changes, or my rule is ready for production, and off we go is GA, right? So you can express that here. Do you have a description for it? Do you have guidance for that rule? And that's how you would normally work with it. And finally, you want to do severity, right? And severity allows you to define how concerned should I be with this finding, right? So is this finding going to be something that I should act on now, or is it something that I can perhaps not be too worried about, like a low severity issue? So we do have some ways of showing you that. Finally, the nitty gritty details, which we call the rule definition, the actual main course of this thing. Uh, you define what entity is this rule meant to be at. You define the schema, perhaps if you take some specific parameters, you define them here as well. And finally, we have some other things that I will talk about soon. So going into rule types, it's important to know how Minder operates. And Minder's policy engine has three stages that it works in. The first one is ingestion. And ingestion is probing and getting the state of the world, right? So how does this entity look like for this particular thing I'm interested for? Eval or evaluation is Minder doing the actual policy check. So going through structures, evaluating, is this enabled or not, or does it meet my expectations? So Minder has an eval stage for this. And it takes the ingest in order to evaluate. And finally, action. So it takes the result of the evaluation, and if it's not correct, then it does something. And that something could be fixing the issue. So let's dive even deeper. Ingestion, it's making sense of the entity, right? So for a repository, you want to check a commit hash and maybe get the state of the Git tree, right? So you're going to be able to access the files and do so at a checkpoint. And the word checkpoint is quite important because that is a concept in Minder, right? A checkpoint allows you to reference that particular state in time. And so you know that at commit X, your entity or your repo passed your checks, right? And maybe at commit Y, it failed them and so on, right? So Minder is able to keep track of it and give you the history of checks as well. For an artifact, for example, this could be a digest. And all of this also has a point in time kind of scenario. So at some point, you should be able to do how did this repo evolve over time, right? We do have a history command that allows you to do that. Ingest take parameters, right? And so if you need to do something like, I want to check the state of my branch protection configuration for this branch, you would use the branch as a parameter, right? So the way that Minder operates with all of these things is that, as I mentioned before, we have providers and providers have traits. The GitHub provider, for instance, would implement the REST trait because it has the REST API, and it would implement the Git trait because, I mean, it enables Git as well. For PRs, it would implement the diff trait. And in the future, in the near future, you're going to have deps, meaning what are the dependencies for this particular entity as made sense from the provider point of view. All right. So we are going to give you access to dependency information too, and that's going to be super exciting. So this is how ingest works. Now, once you do the ingest, meaning once you view the state at a certain checkpoint of an entity, then you do evaluation. So first you know how it's doing, and then you do policy on top of that. And as I mentioned, the eval step or evaluation checks the ingestion result at a certain time, and you need to check that it meets expectations. Normally, you're going to have input as well. And so maybe you want to add that only a certain list of people have access to a repo. So you could do that with this, right? So it's basically parameters for the policy, or we call it input for the profile, right? Minder offers a bunch of engines for you to choose from. The two main ones that we have that are general purpose are JQ and Rego, right? JQ is very good for traversing complex JSON structures because, REST APIs implement JSON all over the place. So we wanted to give people an easy way to traverse. And Rego is a super powerful policy language that I just love. And a shout out to my friends from Stira for building Rego on Open Policy Agent. I'm a big fan. And so we have access to such power in Minder, right? And that's fantastic. So those are the two main engines that you can use. If you have a use case for building something like a cell engine, please bring it towards us, because we'd love to hear your use cases. And it's not only this, but we also have some single purpose engines as well. So it turns out that there are cases where doing execution in Go is a little bit faster than having a general policy engine. And so that's what we did. Homoglyphs is a big example of this. Homoglyph, as I mentioned before, is an attack where somebody tries to confuse you by adding something with some UTF character. This could be an invisible character, or this could be a character that looks like another one. So they will confuse you and try to introduce a vulnerability this way. Minder has a rule for this, and we do it in Go in such a way that it's super performant, and we don't have to write extremely complex Rego, right? So that's one of the use cases where you would want to write a Golang-based rule that goes into the Minder server. We also have a bool check, so it would check OSV and give you a nice result. But we're now building this into a more general feature for such things, right? So you should be able to do it in Rego too. And so this is the eval step. Finally, we have the action step. And this could be something as performing an action, right? Like remediating, such as fixing the issue. You could create a pull request, because we don't want Minder to write directly to Git. We do it via pull request, so we have an action for that. Maybe you want to fix it via REST call, and that's also possible. So you could create one that way. Or maybe you want to alert, right? And a way of alerting is by creating a security advisory. So we have an option to do so. So these are some of the things that Minder can do. We're constantly expanding the engine to do more things, but this is some of the things that you could do today. So now, enough talk. I probably made all of you dizzy, so maybe you want to see some code, because that's how we all learn, by doing. And so let's go ahead and try to build a rule type by ourselves. So in order to get kickstarted, I came up with a little bit of verbiage, right? So this is going to be a rule that checks for key files being ignored in your get ignore file, right? So the idea is to get ignore is a little file that allows you to ignore files in such a way that they don't get checked in Git. And so we want to make sure that we don't check in potentially dangerous key files. And so that's what we're going to build today. Now, this is not super interesting. That's why I had it copied here already. But here we have a display name. Ensure that key files are filtered out from Git. If it fails, we have this. We can build a description, and we can build guidance. And this is how we are right now. So let's get started. We're going to build a definition. So def, and this is very important. This is where we're going to put all the nitty-gritty details from our rule type. Then in entity, we're going to put this in a repository. Rule schema is going to be empty because we're not going to take any parameters. Param schema is going to be empty. Again, no parameters for the ingest either. And we're already halfway there, right? Ingest type Git. And in the case of Git, you don't also need to do any parameters. Minder will automatically detect what is your default branch and do the right thing and check out that and do the evaluation there, right? So this is all we need to do for ingest. All right, so now we have this. Now let's do the eval, and this gets a little bit more complex, but we'll see. I like Rego, so I'm going to show you how to do it in Rego. So type Rego. And so normally, as you can see, you have types for almost absolutely everything. We took the driver notion and went ahead with it, and you'll see it all over the place. So in this case, I really want to specify this is a Rego evaluation, and these are the constraints. This is the type of engine that we have. For Rego, we have a couple of modes of operation. We have one called deny by default, which is if I find something specifically, just fail it already. Sorry, if I don't find something, fail it already. So you will look for something in your policy, and if it doesn't meet your expectation, fail. And then you have constraints, which looks for violations, right? So that's really handy for, let's say that you have a dependency list and you want to make sure that you don't have a certain dependency in your list of dependencies. You could use constraints. In our case, we're going to use deny by default, right? And so just to give myself a quick reminder, and this is what I normally do when I'm developing things, I'm going to look at examples because nobody remembers everything from the beginning. And so let's see. These are repositories, rule types, GitHub, and let's look at no binaries in repo. So as I mentioned, this went for constraints. We're using Rego here, and we're able to walk the file system and things like that. So dev package minder, and here we go. Dev package minder, import Rego v1, default allow false. So in this case, since we're denying by default, we're telling Minder to deny this by default, right? So if this doesn't meet our expectations, we go ahead and fail this thing. And this is how you would do it in Rego. So allow if file.read now what I'm doing is I want to allow this rule or make it pass if I'm able to read a git ignore file and let's see, contains file string .pem. So now I'm checking that file string, which I should not have quoted, there you go, contains this, so that we are effectively ignoring a PEM file. And let's see, I mean, I'm trying to live code this from memory, and so maybe it will fail, but we're gonna give it a try anyway. And if it doesn't work out, I do have a reminder checked out in my folder. So let's say minder rule type create, and here we go. So now we have created a rule type called a git filter out key files, right? In order to speed things up a little bit, I am going to use a profile that I have created already, filter out keys profile, and this is very simple, right? So you just create a profile like I did before, filter keys profile, and then I call this simple rule that I already created. So minder profile create profile.yaml. Oh, sorry, filter keys profile. Here we go. Now minder profile status list. And we can see that it's passing, and this is a good thing. And let's see if this is really passing, because trust but verify. Demo repo go. I have a git ignore right here. And we are effectively filtering out these spam files. Now, something that I did not add here is, let's say, a pkcs11 file or a psk file. And so let's check for that, because I don't want to check those in. I don't want to get my team to check those in. So let's add it to our rule type. Contains file str psk. Here we go. Minder rule type apply.
Hey, Oz, quick question for you. At the
Yes.
bottom of your screen, I see like if you want to share, it's covering up part of where you're typing.
No.
I know. So I don't know if you can, yeah, exactly. Thank you.
Thank you for noting that. So, all right. So now we have updated this, and this should allow us to actually re-implement. I mean, check for PSK files, right? Let's say that I want to add anything else, right? I would do it via that. In this case, for instance, I can wait. Just give me a second. Code security. Do I have branch protection? Because I wanna make sure that I can actually edit this. Require merge. Gonna allow this for now. Oops. I just want to make sure that I can commit to my own repo, because right now I don't have collaborators. But this is not a good practice. You should have branch protections enabled. Right now it's only me. All right. Yeah, now I can do it. Or I could have done it through Git. But okay. Let's see. Do I have a status list? Right now it's failing because I don't have a PSK file ignored. And if I want to ignore it, I should be able to do so by just adding it here. Let's see. I should be able to do it directly now here. PSK, commit changes, commit. There we go. And now it's passing, right? So it's something as easy as that. If we want to go forward and start writing something a little bit more complex, let's try to go ahead and do so. A user in Discord had an idea of checking some branch protection setting just to make sure that you're able to restrict who can push to a certain branch. And so I went ahead and did that ahead of hand. And so let's see, backup, branch protection, restrict who pushes, and it looks more or less as follows. I added all the verbiage. I am going to push that so our friend from Discord is able to work. But I will show you now how this works with the full example. So this is again for a repository, but in this case, I've added a property that I want to make sure that you can pass in the branch. And if you don't pass in the branch, it should be able to just automatically detect the default branch as well. I want to restrict that only certain users are able to commit to my repo. And so I added a property to my rule schema that allows me to pass a list of users. You can pass a list of teams, and you can pass a list of apps. I'm using the REST ingest in order to check. And so in this case, I went ahead and looked for repos with my owner, my name, right? So these are just Minder parameters that you're able to automatically detect, right? So we get the owner name, right, which is how I get the path for the REST API for GitHub. Check the branch parameter and get the protection options, right? You're able to add fallbacks if you don't find it, right? So it doesn't output an error, it just will give you a failure. And finally, this is a lot more complex, right? So I went ahead and did the constraint and checked every single thing. So now, if you don't find a branch protection, this is an issue, and it will show you. If you don't have restrictions, this is an issue. We want to check that the members that I specified are part of our users. And so we check that, teams, apps, and so on. So I'm going to push this to Git, but this is all Rego that one is able to write and extend Minder with. And so let's see this in action. right? Minder rule type create, branch protection pushes, and here we go. And then back up. We have a profile, theme, restrict. Here we go. So in this case, I want to make sure that my user is allowed to push to the main branch, right? And so that's it. I'm not going to add themes. I'm not going to add apps. Minder profile create, restrict, and Minder profile status list. And we can see that it's an issue. And so let's look at our branch protection rules. Branch protection, edit, and you can see that I'm not enabling this at all. If I enable it and actually add myself, we should be good to go. All right, I'm gonna push this to Git, and hopefully our friend from Discord is gonna have whatever he needs. But this is more or less how you go. The way that I usually work around this is that I look at samples. We have Minder rules and profiles, and I remember the specifics of the packaging for some things. But other than that, is you just need to know some Rego and YAML, and you don't necessarily need to touch Go at all, right? So that's the end of this. Again, if folks want to contribute, if you want to add your own rule types, if you have requests for rule types, like reach out. We do have an open source repo, so you can raise an issue in Minder rules and profiles. We are on the OpenSSF Slack, so we're happy to get feedback there. And we do have presence in Discord, which we're also happy to answer you there.
Although we would prefer if you do try out Minder and have questions, run into issues, or anything else, that you focus in the OpenSSF Slack. So
Yes.
I've posted into the chat channel how to navigate that system. If you need an invite, I put an invite link there. But yeah, we're trying to transition away from our old Discord server onto the OpenSSF Slack since we're officially a sandbox project now. So yeah, you can hit us up there. Great. Well, thank you so much, Oz. I will put a call for any last minute questions out there, so we can have like another 30 seconds here that we'll kind of wait for any questions to come in. But if you have questions, please type them into the chat, and we'll ask them now. Otherwise, yeah, do check us out at stacklok.com. Minder is in GitHub at github.com/mindersec, MINDERSEC. And then /Minder is then the actual repo for what Oz kind of covered today. Great. Okay, well, I don't think there are any other questions. I don't see anything coming in. So thank you so much, Oz, for taking the time to really dive into this topic. And yeah, it was a great session.
Yeah, hopefully people enjoyed it as much as I did. And all right, folks, we'll talk to you on Slack, and have a good day, everyone.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.